Travels of the Ellis Arbor is an audio narrative set in the world of Bastion using 5e compatible characters. A dark fantasy world with chaos, intrigue, magic, and mystery. The story, setting, and sounds are written by Lonomy and published by lonomy.creative. Tune in for episode 5, Devotion. Now bound twixt a mob of soldiers and a locked antechamber, the crew of the Ellis Arbor looked on toward the beach. Their escape was all but thwarted, and their options limited. How now would they escape the ire of the guard? Now enraged and ever more determined, Moore continued his assault upon the massive iron doors, hoping that an inch would give them the leverage to slip inside. All the while, the burning rage and shouts of orders were barked on, clamorous against the trudge of boots and the chink of armor and the endless barrage of Moore's pounding. What felt like a moment turned into minutes as the guard formed an orderly barrier around the sanctuary. Their crossbows drawn, and their faces turned to grimaces of pure delight. A fine mess you have brought upon our heads, Captain. How now do you intend to navigate this debacle? The sarcasm pouring from every word that the wizard spoke. His demeanor had shifted from blood-crazed and callous to a quiet confidence, as if he knew a means to escape their now predicament. And without a thought, Darian pulled tight at the chains binding Carpathian, his hands now drawn together, tightening around his wrists and loosening his grip upon the gladius. A burning intent met Carpathian as the captain glared but a few inches from his face. You are an unspeakable pest. How telling that your return should harrow us with proud knights and rude militia. I've a mind to give them you. Perhaps a trade of blood for our freedom. A glance. The look in Carpathian's eyes did not narrow. Instead, it turned sourer still. His lips pursed into a wicked grin. And no sooner did Darian's threats meet an unsatisfying response, the black sword from Carpathian's hand came clambering down upon the stonework steps that they found themselves. Strangely, the metal sound began to echo, as if sourceless, and from within a grand, empty chamber. The metallic sound continued to thrum, building in intensity until the entire area was awash with it. First Moore and Ed, and then Nout, followed closely by the contingent of guards at their wake, clutching their hands around their ears, trying desperately to drown the infernal sound out. Whatever manner of enchantment upon your blade, wizard, cut it off! Dispel it! We will be rent by its cacophony! Bearing through the desperate pain and displeasure, the captain and the wizard stared down at each other, neither giving in the slightest. A match of wits and metal, more pressing than even the threat of an armed contingent. As the thrum reached its climax, a crack of thunder and the rolling sound of heavy stone. The crowd and the crew looked around in bewilderment. The sound had stopped, but was replaced by a more soothing hum, bathing the area in a strange comfort. The iron walls before them began to glow, faintly at first. Thick black lines of magical light began to mark the surface, interconnecting at plain angles. A web of arcana now thatched the door, splaying out at the ends as if representative of a spider's web or a fish's net. Only in a matter of seconds, the glyph was complete. It flashed, twice, before returning to a more stable iron surface. And the beach, now strangely quiet. A source of quiet discomfort, as all who were present looked on. From under his breath, Ed muttered to himself, "Awful, awful, dreadful! Oh goodness, why on earth must we be privy to Carpathian and his dark magics?" A thud, a crack, and a heavy pushing sound, pre-emanating the iron door as it swung inward, opening slowly and revealing the shapes beyond. The dimly lit interior was only scryable by those nearest the door. Stonework trellis and surfaces lined wall to wall with simple carvings and adorned upon the floor. A beam of light shone toward the center of the room, lined with wooden pews. Long since they had seen the hand of a carpenter. Bent at awkward angles, but with the distinct glow of candlelight beyond, the sanctuary lay before them. Though just beyond the entrance, a figure stood between the crew and their sanctuary, draped in a light blue robe, head covered with a broad hood and stained white by the aging of constant sunlight. The hems of the robe glinted in the dim candlelight, shining in a faint stream of silver. Icons of waves and spiraling patterns adorn the arms and the lengths of the gown. Quietly, they stepped toward the party, never looking up or revealing the face beneath the hood. As if in a second wave, this visage was met by a strong, distinct aroma. The air was perfumed with a strong mix of roses, ashes, incense, and more. A stranger and more pungent smell could not be dreamed up even in the darkest corner of a tavern. Though strange and bereft of origin, it was intoxicating. Even the crew were now drawn to the censer, held tightly in the left hand of this acolyte. They continued on, holding the censer aloft and filling the entrance with that same benevolent aura. And then a voice, a breathy yet heavy voice, appeared from behind the hood. A woman, it seemed, stepping out onto the beach and now addressing the crowd. "None would deny the sanctuary of any that bear upon these steps. The waves take you, should you lay claim to them." And with frightening speed, her right hand now stretched out toward the nearest guard. With a swift, upward movement, a hand was revealed beneath the robe. Porcelain skin laid with opalescent jewels and silver bands, clutching a cocked and ready pistol. Its flintlock already drawn, the acolyte aimed toward the guard. Clutching his spear, the guard retaliated. A thunderous clap once more filled the area as a single bullet fired from their simple flintlock, resuming the intensity of this event. Drawn backward by the force of the bullet, the sound of metal bending and cracking as the guard toppled into the sand. A glancing blow, but one that would surely find its mark again. Smoke peated off the barrel as the woman now aimed her shot at the next nearest guard. "Leave us. Tell your masters to stay adrift of this chapel." A look. A pause. Each turning to the other, looking to each other as how to proceed. Though despite all certainty, the guardsmen conceded. Eyeing the crew as they sheathed their weapons and slung their bows, they returned to the sands, skirting the beach toward the entrance of the briny ward once more. Her hand now returning to her side, the acolyte spoke aloud, now to the crew, without so much as turning her back. I shall remain a moment to ensure they do not return for your heads. Go, enter into the chapel and make yourselves comfortable. I will be with you anon. Do as she says. I'm not one to shirk such determined hospitality. And so, the crew entered into the antechamber, met with a distinct shift in air and surroundings. They stepped quietly into the vacuous space. Tall pillars and glinting candlelight met them as they were finally within this shadowed sanctuary. More now returned to their normal form, waltzed in beside Edward, who had only just removed his hands from his ears. Taking a seat at the nearest pew, they were shortly joined by Nout, brushing the sand and dirt out of his enchanted floating disc. Carpathian was next. Sheathing the heavy, blackened sword, he instead wandered the chapel, drinking in the surroundings and studying the crude markings upon every wall and pillar. Darian was the last to enter, sheathing his weapon and adjusting his breastplate. He found a few marks and cuts, no more than bruises sustained in the chase. Clutching at his breast pocket, he found the glass bottle untouched. Safe in his keeping, he grasped it firmly for a moment, dusted off his boots, and awaited the acolyte to return. Minutes passed. The crew anxiously awaited the return of their host as she stood silently upon the steps of the entrance, watching and waiting, until she finally turned inward, stepping back into the chamber. At her approach, the iron doors reacted, closing behind her with that same heavy scraping. And as the dust settled, the tension began to drain, and she addressed them. Now a quiet and comely voice directed them, her hood drawn back far enough that they could see the aged yet beautiful features of the woman who had allowed them entry. Welcome to this sanctuary, travelers. I am Adeline, an acolyte of these halls. I serve those whom these walls revere. You are safe here, for as long as you revere them also.
And who exactly do these walls revere?
Nout spoke quietly, as if not wanting to cause alarm, and with a smile, she responded. She who gives life to all, yet can swallow the very same in her wrath. I speak of the waves and the oceans. The many seas of Bastion are my mistress, and you are welcomed by her. Travels of the Ellis Arbor is made possible by the generous support of our subscribers, followers, and most notably, our patrons. Thanks to Rob Jenkin, Nathan Ebley, Ben Avail, and Ensign Turtle for supporting us so far on this journey. Please subscribe, give a like or a comment, follow us on Twitter, and stay tuned for the next episode. Don't forget, take care of each other.